That's your old friend.
Your professor, I think, is on
Okay. Let me see if you can hear me. Let me make sure you can hear me.
Good morning, Lynn.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Lynn, I can hear you fine. How about volume with
Okay,
me?
I can't hear either. I can't hear. I can't hear, and everything's up.
I can hear you fine.
Oh, no, I can't hear him, and everything's up. I don't.
Is it still connected?
Yeah, it's still connected, but I can't hear him. That's what I'm trying to figure out. How can I get him to hear? How can I get it where I can hear him?
Did you check your volume?
Mute, stop. I'm going to check my volume. Audio options. I can't hear my computer audio. Okay.
Is that
Can
it?
you hear a ring? Okay. Can you hear me now?
I hear you fine, Lynn.
All righty. Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think that I have just now given you control of the desktop so that you can be the host and the presenter.
Okay.
You see a button down at the bottom that says share?
Yes, yes.
Okay. You're going to need to have your dissertation. Well, no, try the PowerPoint. Open the
Yes.
PowerPoint and share. Once you have the PowerPoint on your desktop, then you should be able to share the PowerPoint, and we'll see it on the screen.
Okay, I have it on my desktop. Now I need to go back
Click share,
go back to share.
and one of the windows that comes up should be your PowerPoint.
Let's see, I'm gonna click on this one and share. It'll share my desktop, and then I'll share.
Now I'm seeing your desktop,
Okay.
and it says the final defense.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna click on this and then put present.
Yeah.
And there we go.
All right. That's how you're going to present. Okay. Okay. I wanted to make sure that all this stuff worked before 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're checking it now. Are you getting feedback from my audio?
No, not really.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. What we may find is when several people connect, we may have to mute ourselves so that you don't get feedback. You can work from your end. Is that Dr. Owens in the background?
It is. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. First of all, I want to say thank you, and I wouldn't have been surprised if we needed to reschedule this. I know things are going crazy in the districts. I'm sheltering in place at home and able to Zoom, so I feel like I can continue and carry on with my life, but y'all have been disrupted crazy in the last week. And
Yes.
I would love to hear later what y'all are doing for plans for the teachers and the children in your district, but I'm very thankful that we're able to make this time and hopefully move Lynn a little closer to being Dr. Bradshaw.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
So thank you.
It's working well. So we can chat a little bit afterwards.
Okay.
Her defense and we can share what we're doing in the district.
Okay. I would like to hear that stuff. And I bet you Dr. Laws might be interested to know as well. But Lynn, I rushed you here at the end and you pulled it off. You pulled it together. I think there's a little editing to do still before we're done. And we have time. You have time. And I hope that there will be time after you're home and district work is done to get her done. Dr. Laws pointed out a few comments and inconsistencies, things to clean up. I looked at your latest draft, and I have a couple of questions and things for you to clean up, but it's all minor. And did you make any changes to the PowerPoint this morning?
I went through and made sure that those slides that that looked like they was jumbled, I think they jumbled up when I downloaded it to you
Okay.
all, but it wasn't jumbled on mine.
If it looks good, if it looks good at your end, then that's fine. I just couldn't see the text for those couple slides myself. And
I figured we can go, the first part, that's a review of the proposal. I can kind of go through that and just making sure that it's just for reminder of you, those,
okay.
but I really don't need to go through them. But
don't dwell on that stuff. Remind us again very briefly that it's autism and it's Lego therapy, but definitely don't dwell on the lit review. Get us as quickly as you can through the methodology and the results. We want to know in today's presentation, what were the results? What are your recommendations? And so that's the thrust of the main part of the meeting today. Then we'll answer whatever questions Dr. Owens and Dr. Laws have. And then what I would like, I'm not the greatest at listening and taking good notes. Dr. Owens, could I ask you to maybe make notes of any changes or recommendations that we come up with?
Yes, I can do that.
I really appreciate it. Lynn is going to need to fix a couple of things, I think, and if you keep good notes on that stuff, that'll be a big help to me.
Okay.
And I should be able to multitask and control Zoom, but I can't. So I know I won't be a very good note taker if that's my job.
Right. And as you shared, I did mention to her about a few edits as well.
Okay.
But, I did say that she should have time, based on, your recommendation, that she'd have time to fix those edits.
Yes. Miss Dunn is joining us. Hello.
Hi. Dr.
Hi. Thanks for being here.
Hi, how are you?
We haven't started officially yet. We will soon at 11, but thank you for being here. Lynn, let me finish a thought that before it escapes me. I do have a couple of edits for you, and what I will do, I was making comments right in the draft that you sent, and I will send that back to you after our meeting today. Look for the comment bubbles and just make sure you fix that stuff.
Okay.
We definitely do have time for you to get another draft back to Barbara, who will provide the clean one before it goes to Dr. Bull.
Okay.
That's the sequence after today is, I hope, that we will approve you, but I see some minor edits that will need to go back to Barbara Hildreth and then on to Dr. Bull before it's all done. Well, I'm really appreciative that Zoom is working and that we're all good. I'm going to go take a bathroom break before 11 o'clock. If anybody else needs to, I've got 10:54.
Yes.
And we will start at 11 o'clock sharp.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And we were able to communicate, so I don't think I need to sign in.
No, you could. Yeah, you won't have to sign me because you can feel like
Right.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And I have my PowerPoint can make notes on it as well as I remember someone took, well, not sure if she said yours.
Excuse me, I just wanted to let you know that I won't be able to listen to the entire presentation, but I did want to get an idea because I will be defending probably within the next 3 weeks to a month. And so
Okay,
I wanted to just see one for myself. So, just know that at some point I will have to click out, and I hope that it does not cause a ding or any interruption in your presentation when I do that. But I just wanted to give you that heads up.
okay, thank you.
So,
You're
Ms. Dunn, are you currently you're working on the dissertation in the same field?
Educational leadership, my dissertation is on the impact of research-based professional development, the impact on teacher self-efficacy and collective efficacy beliefs.
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay, all right.
So I'm gonna mute my microphone here so you don't get any background noise from me.
Okay. You don't see me. Okay. So do you want- Just remember this, trust yourself.
Y'all can ask questions. See, I see what he's saying.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to you.
Yeah,
I don't know, was it download?
Listen,
But what if mine was downloaded? and I
that
sent
was
to you?
paid. See, I
It's
don't-
on your
I don't-
research questions number 4, I believe. That's where it starts. Research question number 4.
see,
It's not on your.
it comes up on that, but when I printed it,
See, when I actually was going through the PowerPoint, I said it was combined,
Mhm.
stacked.
stacked on top of each other. But when I
But what
see
we're
it here,
seeing there is not.
no. Okay, I see it stacked on each other.
Welcome, Dr. Bull. I have opened the Zoom meeting and turned control over to Ms. Bradshear Ray, but we're not quite to 11 o'clock, and so it'll be a couple of minutes before we begin. And welcome, Ms. Dunn.
See, you wanna get here?
I can see. I just couldn't see everything that's on there.
Yeah, at the same time. I think that-
Yeah.
You'll be able to see it.
Welcome, Dr. Laws.
Morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm good. Hope y'all are.
Yes.
Yeah, you're at the office.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
We're going to begin in just a minute. Last call before our 11 o'clock dissertation defense.
Can everyone see me and my screen?
I can see
I'm-
you.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Good.
And I have Dr. Owens in with me.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I know that we have the committee assembled. Dr. Owens, Dr. Laws, thank you for being here. Dr. Bull, thanks for joining us. these are trying times, and we're all doing the very best that we can. The fact that we are Zooming from for a distant defense is a good thing, I think. Dr. Owens, Ms. Bradshear, Ray, Dr. Ms. Dunn, those of you who are doing the work of providing teaching and learning for the children who are out of school now, y'all, my heart goes out to you. As a former administrator, I can't imagine what you're going through in order to try to prepare and provide the needs for the needs of the children. You're doing God's work, and thank you for that. It's extraordinary circumstances. I think we're going to get through this, and I know we're going to get through it, and it's because of your hard work and effort. So thank you for that, and thank you for taking an hour or so this morning to help Miss Bradshear Ray hopefully become Dr. Bradshear Ray. We're going to try to keep this whole thing going here. So we're here for a professional conversation. I think the technology is all working well. I have phone numbers, and we'll try to keep the process going. But I'm going to turn the control over to Miss Bradshear Ray, and she will present her PowerPoint to tell us about her research. This is a professional conversation. We will have time for her presentation, and then time for some discussion and questions at the end. Lynn, would you take questions during the presentation, or would you prefer to have them all at the end?
I can take them during the presentation. I'm fine with that.
Okay. And I've already included Lynn that her presentation's too long, and she needs to skip over some of the lit review and get right to the results. But I do have some questions at the end, and I will hold mine till then.
Okay.
So thanks to all of you for being here. Thank you, Lynn, for being ready to present in the midst of chaos.
Yeah.
And take it away.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I'm gonna go through my results of the effects of Lego-based therapy on social skills of students with autism spectrum disorder. Thank my chair, Dr. Palermo, for all of your assistance. My agenda, I'm gonna quickly go through the nature of the problem, the statement. I'm gonna look at the research. I'm gonna just remind you that this is something you can look through as a research. Then I'm gonna get really down into the results. The nature of the problem, basically we were looking at the increase in the number of students with autism spectrum disorder and how difficult it is for the districts to serve these students with their the struggling needs and trying to find interventions. So that's the nature of this problem for this research. The significance of the research was basically the same. We're looking to determine the therapy and the Lego-based and to see if this was something that schools could use to help promote the social and communication skills in students with autism spectrum disorder. Of course, the Lego review is here for you to review. Then we looked at, there were already some kinds of treatments that was here, so I put that back in there for you to review. And then my research design. In my research design, I used the SIP model to answer my questions. I have 5 research questions, and I used the SIP model to answer those questions. The methodology I used was the Stufflebean SIP model, using the content, input, process, and product of this model. Now for my research. I used, my participants was a 10-person multidisciplinary team. And when we look at a multidisciplinary team, that's the team that uses to evaluate and or to serve students with disabilities. And in this sense, these are the team that used to serve the students with autism. I had 2 teachers, one teacher assistant, the school psychologist, the educational diagnostician, which does the educational testing or evaluation of students, 2 occupational therapists, 2 speech therapists, and our district level autism coordinator. They were all a part of this research. The instrument I used, I reviewed the district's documentation from this program. I used the Lakers scale survey, and I used a semi-structured interview. And when I say semi-structured interview, meaning that I did have questions already, but I were open-ended questions that could lead to other information or other discussions. My research design, the procedure, for the context, I used the district school, and I used the interview of the district level personnel and school level personnel, and I also reviewed their documentation that they have from the program, documentations that they were keeping as they were implementing the program. For the input, I used an interview, and I also used the training interview from the training and from the survey to answer questions about training and about information that they had from that will go along with the input area. For the process, I used the interview and a survey, and it was looking at the implementation. How well was this implemented? Should we implement it again or in other places? And then the product, I looked at the outcome, also using the interview and the survey. Okay. The results, looking at question 1. What circumstance led to the implementation of this Lego-based therapy social skills program? And what led to this, we looked at the research and how the prevalence and how autism was growing nationally and within this district. As a result, we saw that the students with autism spectrum disorder was growing rapidly, or at least growing to a higher number than some of the other disabilities in this county. So we wanted to see, well, what else are we gonna do with the students since we're having a higher number? And if you can see in this district, from 2014 to 2018, you can see that there was a steady growth of the students with autism spectrum disorder, from 102 in 2014 to 149 in 2018. And question 2, we were looking at, to what degree did the goal of the Lego-based therapy program address that social and communication needs for these students? And doing this research, I looked at the data that the district had already, and doing that data, some of the data the district was collecting, they were looking at evaluation of the students. At the end of sessions, at the end of the term, they evaluated the students, asking questions from the students. They looked at whether the students was making growth and how well they were doing on certain areas. For instance, they looked at, were they following rules? And in that session, they said that 75% of the students were following the rules some of the time, and 25% follow the rules without prompting. Sometimes they had to be prompted, and a lot of times, 25%, they saw growth with students growing without prompting. When we looked at questions like, were they using their strategies? And then they said, using their strategies, it was, I'm trying to look at that number. 50% of the students used their strategies rarely, and then there was 50% used it without prompting. So whereas they usually had to always show them, now the students was learning to use the strategies and to work without any prompting. And so this graph showed how the teachers was resulting in evaluating the students at the end of their sessions. Question 2 also looked at to what degree did the goals of the Lego-based therapy program address the social skills? And this was from the question, the survey. The teachers had to look at the level of agreements. So what I did was I looked at the level of agreement, and I went through and decided or figured out how much level of agreements for the teachers used. And when I look at the questions, for instance, 5.8 of the teachers of the score, they said that they were in agreement that the goals of this intervention was to assist the students, that the program met the goals that they were looking for. Also, when it looked at the outcome of the intervention showing improvement in the students' social skills, 5.3, the teachers are saying that they agree that that this program improved the social skills of the students. Okay. And from the interview, these were some of the comments that the individuals, the participants made. They would say there were more social with which they were talking about students were more social with each other, and they were able to explain things better. So they were using their communication skills. The kids communicated better with each other. They did better in their social skills, like when they went to recess or when they went to other group activities. They learned how to step back and take turns and let other people talk. So they were able to use those social and communication cues from this program. Question number 3, it addressed to what extent was the Lego-based therapy program feasible for implementing, potentially successful and cost efficient for meeting the needs of the students. And in this part, what I did was I interviewed the district autism coordinator, seeing, well, what did you use to determine that this program was something that your district needed? And as you can see, she attended a session by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, which talked about students with autism and the Lego Club promoting those social skills. So she took information from there. She also did a research by using the Lego-based therapy book. And once she looked at that, looking at the number of autistic kids in this district, she thought this was something that would be feasible. So as we began to research, looking at her data, so when I looked at the cost efficient, she took $300 and she was able to start this program. After she's done her research and read the book, she was able to take $300. So that seems to be cost efficient when there's other interventions that were a lot more expensive. So when we look at cost efficient for the start this program, we can see that that would be a cost efficient to begin a program such as this. We also looked at the survey again, looking at whether the agreements of the implementation of the program and looking at certain questions that was on that survey, pulling out those questions to say, was this cost efficient? Was it potentially successful? And these are some of the comments, the information that came up. Overall, 5.6% says this intervention was beneficial for students with autism. Teachers were saying the staff found this intervention suitable for the described purpose and mission, and that the program was an acceptable intervention for students with autism. Question 4, we looked at what would be done differently if the program was replicated. So, and I use these questions as a basis for getting the answer to these this research question. I said, did you feel that you were supported sufficiently, or have you had the opportunity to communicate it? Do you think that it would be replicated? Were you talking about it to other teachers and other people who serve students with disabilities, or serve those students that are autism? And would you implement it again? And why or why not? And would you recommend it to other school staff or other schools? And one of the things that came out of that was they said that the sessions was not long enough. So when they look at replicating it, they would recommend that the sessions be longer, or expand to other schools, or to share their experience with other people, not just students that are teaching students with autism spectrum disorder, but also with general ed teachers as well. And these were some of their comments when we looked at the next question for what are the teachers' perspective. So that goes along with whether you would you recommend it again when we look at the teacher's perspective of this therapy. And they were saying that it was engaging. They loved it. It was positive, beneficial. They were excited, and they saw it as a fun thing as well as a learning experience. And also some of their perspective. When we look at it, 100% of those that took this survey said that the intervention was appropriate for a variety of students. They also liked the procedures of the intervention, and that it was well planned, and that it met the needs of the students. The overall beneficial for students with autism, 100% of them thought that it was beneficial for the students with autism. For the recommendations for the district, and the recommendations came from when we look at how would we replicate this and the teacher's perspective. So one of the things they said was that they had 30 minutes per session, and they would like for it to be longer. When they looked at some of the research and the information in my paper said that teachers were saying that each session, they would review the rules, and then they would begin the sessions. So they thought that it was necessary to review rules, but it cut down into that 30 minutes time for students to be able to communicate, to be able to work, and to be able to socialize. So in increasing that time to 45 minutes an hour will give them time to review the rules, plus have students that opportunity that they communicate, the teachers and therapists time to help students if they have communication and social issues, and so increasing their time would be important. They also thought that it worked really well in this school, in this district, and that they would like to see it go across the district. So if it went across the district, maybe the times that while their students get used to socializing with each other, that maybe they can have time to socialize with other students in other schools across the district. But they also would like to have more in-depth training. The district coordinator read the book, but the other people participating did not read the book. They would like to have had the book themselves to read. And then they would like to have more in-depth training that as they were keeping their data, having training on that information of keeping the data, on training on information of if the students were not able to communicate, what next questions. And they would also like to review instruments of keeping data and measurements to make sure this progress is successful. And they had a better way to collect the data, and that they were measuring everything that they should be measuring. For future research, As the researcher, I saw that if we had a larger sampling, we could see a little bit more. Maybe this group of people that was implementing it at this school knew a little bit more about helping students. Let's see if this really would work if we had a larger group across the district. Look at parent perspective. This program was in its infancy stage, so the researcher, because they were just had permission from parents for students to participate in it. The researcher didn't use the perspective of the parent because the school was not doing a lot of using the parents. But in another research, maybe seeing how the parents have felt, seeing if the parents were noticing anything different. Also, maybe using some of those instruments that we use to test or evaluate students for autism, like the Gilliam rating scales, or the Vineland adaptive behavior, or social communication questionnaire. Using that at the beginning of the research, and then in the middle, and maybe even at the end of the research would be something for a further researcher. Then if we looked at expanding this, this was used in the elementary school, maybe expanding it to a middle and a high school, because we know the social cues and the social things that kids go through in middle and high school may be different from how they're expected to socialize in an elementary school. So expanding it to middle and high school, just to look at the social cues and the difference in the expectation of how they socialize in those different areas. And then just looking at the benefits in other areas. If we see that it's benefiting students with autism, maybe look at whether it's going to benefit the social emotional skills of the behaviors, students with behaviors, or students have anxieties, or even in other social sensory processing disorders. And that's my references that I use. Are there any questions for me?
That's a lot. And Dr. Owens, Dr. Laws, you're invited to ask questions. And
Yes, I have maybe two questions that I did want to ask. My first question to Lynn is, to what extent will your research have on the teaching and learning process?
Well, because students with autism, they have their communication disorder, their self-efficacy, they're being able to be more confident in what they're able to do. This helps them to improve their self-efficacy, because they're able to now communicate with each other, and communication is very important when it comes down to the teaching and learning. It will help students to be able to once they read, and they're able to ask questions if they don't understand, because sometimes that's what some of the communication skills, they don't feel confident enough to ask those questions. It'll also help them with their social cues and being able to socialize in their behavior, because now they'll understand how to react to each other. If someone asks me a question, how do I react?
Also, just on that note, and I think you did address that, certainly I do believe that more professional development is needed. And of course, you shared that the teachers ask for that. Mm-hmm. But I think this is certainly a valuable research project, and especially as we look at students who are on that spectrum, on that autism spectrum. The other question, and you did mention that in your future research, was to what extent will this research have in the future on middle and high school students, mm-hmm. At teachers and also the parents as well, because, beginning this whole process at elementary level, and we know that those students are going to move, to the secondary. So do you have any further thoughts as it relates to what the research, when we look in the future, but also impacting teachers at that particular level and then parents.
And as I said, that the social cues for students at this level, at the middle and the high school, become different. So I think being able to have this as a intervention, maybe even, and this was done, this program now in the elementary school is done during the day, maybe even having it as an after school program would work, because then you can have those students that may not stay after school for those social things could learn to do that in the middle and high school, and just to mingle, teaching them how to socialize with other students in that age, because I see middle and high school, the social cues and what's expected of students in their social lives are different than elementary. So that's why I thought a future research of that would be important.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Owens. Dr. Laws, do you have any comments or questions? I know you did on the latest draft.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I sent that to you. For me, there are a couple of curiosities.
Mhm.
I enjoyed reading this. It's certainly a different kind of dissertation, and so it was just kind of fun to read. And I really liked in your proposals for implications for practice this idea of keeping statistical data on each student and kind of passing it along. That needed to be done better, and I think districts need to keep that in mind. So I really like that, as on page 95. In my opinion, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, I'm intrigued not only with yours, Lynn, but so many other dissertations that a recommendation is more training.
Yes.
That's easy to say. I could say, I need more training on Zoom, or I need more training on this or that. So to me, you didn't elaborate enough on specifically what kind of training. You did mention that they could use some on what is it, review of instruments to collect data.
Mhm.
But so what kind of training are you thinking about? What trainings could be given to these teachers that would help them?
First, I think we need to start with them training them on the criteria for autism spectrum disorder. The state has just adopted new criteria, and making sure that they understand each of those criteria for autism, and making sure that teachers understand and be able to recognize the autism and know what the effects of autism have on students. Then once they understand the effects and they understand what it is, that would be one of the training for not just making sure special ed teachers, but also the general ed teachers, because the majority of students with autism, they are in general ed classes. Then we'll go through and we'll begin to train on the process of the Lego-based therapy. How do you run it? On the instruments again, like how are we going to collect this data? And on those instruments, and looking at the instruments and reading through and seeing where the students are on these instruments. And then they're able to collect that data. So training such as that, first, just on the criteria, and knowing and recognizing, and how interventions and things for students with autism, and then going into the more in-depth of the Lego-based therapy, how to run it, how to ask questions and answer questions, and making sure that students are engaged.
Okay, so I will leave it to your chair, certainly, but to me, if I'm looking at your dissertation and seeking ways to assist these students in their learning, that's the kind of detail I want in chapter 5. I don't want to read the whole dissertation. I want to read chapter 5 and say, okay, what am I going to do? And so I would have liked to have seen more detail there, but I put that, and that's up to you and Dr. Palermo. But I think you can answer that. You just answered that. But I think it would be beneficial in chapter 5 to be a little bit more detailed. But the other curiosity for me was in your chapter 5, you just included the process piece. Why did you decide to handle it in that fashion rather than analyzing all 4 segments of the SIP?
Because in chapter 5,
Blame it on your chair.
And that's fine. I'm just curious about that. Why?
yeah, I looked at, because of when I looked at chapter 5 and I'm looking at the recommendations in chapter 5, I decided to just put in that part of I decided to look at, because it was more about, when I thought about chapter 5, thinking about it as more of what people would look for as the recommendations and what they would do. I thought, let's put this part in, because this is more of what we've done, and then what you would do, the recommendations. That's kind of how I looked at it. And
The other questions are
are
answered pretty well in chapter 4. If it's cheap, then it's good to recommend or replicate. But I urge Lynn to expand on the process in chapter 5.
Okay, and then the product, as I understood your presentation from the data, the teachers who had done it recommend others to do it, right?
Yes.
And so to me, it would be, that would be something that I would also probably, as a conclusion piece, and backing it with data, would include. But that's just me. As I said, number one, you wrote it well. I commend you for that, and it was a fun study. So that's it for me.
Dr. Laws, let me, and to the whole committee and to Lynn as well. Lynn and I have been working on this. She's been passionate about Legos and the Lego therapy training for autism since the get-go. I steered her in a couple different directions. I steered her away from interviewing the children and doing the actual research with the young people, because I honestly felt like we were going to run into a IRB problem with that. But instead, she went for program evaluation, and yet wanted to expand that at the end and say it's more than a program evaluation. We are going to make recommendations at the end, whether the district should continue this or expand this. But she wanted to say something larger, so I urged her to again interview and to survey those folks delivering the program. They did make recommendations that it ought to continue, and that ought to be emphasized in chapter 5. I agree, Dr. Moss.
Yeah, and I mean, I think she did, and certainly one of her slides talked about that. But I would have, again, I'm just thinking in terms of superintendents and program directors that would be looking at this, which you are, Lynn.
Yes.
They're not going to read everything. They're going to look. It's kind of like cheating and reading at the end and see how the story ends in a novel. Most are going to do that, and I would. I thought you had. I thought your chapter 4 presented some good data. In retrospect, and I'm glad you addressed why you didn't talk to the parents. It would have been really good to have parental input for program evaluation. But even with that, I would like more specificity. I think with okay, so how are we going to train these people? And this group of individuals that you interviewed would be the ones to say, well, I sure could have used more of this, and I sure could have used more of this, and this was really effective, and I really like this part of it. And that's what I would be looking for if I were in your role, Lynn. So, yeah, but again, I've spent more time being critical. I enjoyed this, Lynn, and I've known you now for a while, and I'm very proud of you.
I know that we're having a professional conversation.
Yes.
And, yeah, I think it's an excellent piece of research, Dr. Law. But I also would agree with you in terms of more detail about the professional development. Lynn and her and this is just to support, what's being done, and as we continue to move forward in this particular area. But they did present a PD in the district for us in terms of the new law as it relates to, autism. And it was just fantastic. I am the executive director for Student Support Services. So one of the things after that, I had the autistic coordinator, district person, to come to our staff, which is composed of school counselors, social workers, dropout prevention, and our school nurses. And it was just phenomenal in terms of the response of that PD. And even when they presented to our leadership team. So, I think, more professional development is needed and will be ongoing, because we are constantly learning in terms of how we can best serve our students, with autism, not just only here in Hope County, but throughout. So I think it adds much value, to the research and to the literature.
Yeah, but I mean, even get down into the details of using Legos.
Yeah, right.
You go in and throw a box of Legos in front of a teacher, and she may or may not know
right
how to maneuver with that. I mean, certainly Lynn and Palermo won't be surprised that I would struggle probably figuring out what to do with Legos.
Maybe all of us.
but so I guess that's what I was looking for with it. But so even so a good portion of what we would do in PD would be just the autism awareness and working with these kids, which is challenging to say the least. Then you get into the specificity of what your study was, which is Lego based, and how do we incorporate that, and how does that impact the socialization skills and everything else with the children? That's where you kind of weave your chapter 2 in with it, and I don't, your recommendations for practice were I think a couple of pages, and I was ready for more, because I like I said, I had such fun reading it, and the truth is, Lynn, you got it. I mean, you got it in your data.
Yes.
I just know that Steve Laws wouldn't read your data. Steve Laws would read your chapter 5.
Okay.
And I'm just being honest. I mean, that's what I would do. And I think that's what most would do if they were wanting to use your study to make a difference for kids. So, all right. See how I get Palermo? Tell me to shut up next time.
I'm trying to figure out how to do a breakout room so that we might converse privately, but
I can leave, and then y'all can continue.
that might work. Sure.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
And
Lynn.
I will go ahead and dismiss myself from the group. Thank you so much for letting me sit in.
Thank you for joining us, Rhonda. I appreciate it.
And Dr. Palermo, I don't know if you remember me or not, but you were, when I was doing my, getting my extended master's for administration and supervision, you came out to see me. years ago, so you probably don't remember. It's been probably 6 years now, but
I do remember visiting you at your school, and thank you for
okay.
dropping in, Rhonda.
All right. Thank you so much.
Dr. Bull? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Dr. Bull? I can hear Dr. Owens. I see Dr. I don't think I have any audio for Dr. Bull.
Dr. Bo.
Hello?
I don't know if is he still on?
I see his image. I see video, but no audio from Dr. Bull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Dr. Bull, are you there now? Not getting any audio from him. I hope that he can fix that. Dr. Owens, Dr. Laws, what do y'all think? I hear some edits that need to be made. I noticed that Lynn didn't discuss her results in her abstract. I want her to go back and add to that. So in my latest read, I've been making comments in the text, and I'm going to send that back to her with some edits. It sounds like we still need to. Steve, I think your point is well taken. Adding to the description of the training, the PD that ought to happen should be added to chapter 5. That she could talk about the recommendations that the teachers, that the participants have made, and make those recommendations stronger in chapter 5.
Yes.
What else should Lynn fix?
I just, in terms of just supporting Dr. Lyles and what you said on page 91, I did make a note about extending the PD, as it related to the program from the teachers, and maybe a little bit more about why the Lego therapy appealed to the students. But I had made a note of that as well.
Okay. Let me see if I can call Dr. Bull and get him in here. I don't know. Do you have Dr. Bull on speed dial, Steve?
not on speed dial. I've got his cell. You don't have a cell?
No, I don't.
I got it.
Oh, now he's gone, I think.
Well, we can, we're the committee.
Okay. I was trying to include the dean.
But I think.
Hello.
Oh, he's coming back on.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Bull, are you back? Do we approve of Lynn with changes?
Yes, I think we could, in my vote, that we could approve and move forward with the necessary changes.
Okay. So what I want Lynn to do you agree, Steve?
Yes, you have my notes, and
I do.
And you and I have worked together now for several years. Use it for what you want. Don't use it for what you don't want. The only thing that we all, I think, agreed on is just a further elaboration of the training, but that we could offer. But
Steve, give me Dr. Bull's phone number.
hold on. All right, you ready?
Yep.
919-475-3867.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dr. Bull. I'm well, thanks. Sorry you're having audio problems. 1 year. Yes. Right. I think you're making a very good point about the gaps in the literature review chapter 2. I agree that the perceptions of the team are the really, that's the valuable data that she has, and that really this is a case study. I uh-huh. Okay. And unfortunately, the committee has not been able to hear all of that. I've got you on my cell, but that that's not coming through. Okay. Okay. Dr. Laws, Dr. Owens, Dr. Bull has some significant comments, and he's going to try to log back in and join us so that he can explain some of that.
Okay.
He wants to make Lynn, he wants Lynn to make changes to chapter 2 to boost the lit review on Lego therapy, and feels that basically I agree with his point. With an N of 10 and perceptions from the team, this kind of turned into a case study, and that's okay. That's the way it went. But as a case study, he feels that the interview should have really focused on the psychologist, and that's a person who would have had more. More credence, perhaps, or more knowledge. Dr. Bull, are you back?
I'm back. I'm in Wendy's office.
Okay, great. I was trying to explain to Dr. Owens and to Dr. Laws some of your concerns and questions. Certainly, I can direct Lynn to revisit the literature review and to boost the lit on Lego therapy. And I agree with you that this really turned into a case study. As the research evolved over the course of a year, I urged her to again not talk to the children or to use those metrics. Perhaps should have used more of those metrics about the children's growth and communication skills or social skills, but to focus on surveying and interviewing the team, the participants. I think you have a really good point that weighing the TA and the psychologist the same probably wasn't the best methodology to use. So lots of good recommendations and limitations about the current research and recommendations for improvement. What, Dr. Bull, would you want Lynn to fix in order to make this a dissertation that you could feel good about?
I truly spent some time reading it to get a good grasp. It's really a valuable research. And when we do valuable research, we want the best outcome so that others could replicate it. As it's written right now, it's not replicable. You have to have strong background in this whole process of working with students with autism to be able to facilitate the process. So what I'm looking at, first of all, is outside of chapter 2, which I don't think some of those conceptual frameworks she brought in, like the TOM, the TOM, because I don't think it directly relates to, there's a lot of things in there. The literature review is very strong in terms of the knowledge relating to students with autism, the progression right up to present, and talking about the TEACH model and the ABA and all of that stuff. And I think at some point in time, the research has to focus on because I think one of the committee members did ask, how does this relate to teaching and learning? Now, when we deal with students with autism, it's normalization of education, but we know the deficits are in social and communication. And this is what the Lego therapy is supposed to do, which is to increase the socialization and normalization and communication of these students. Now, these students are based on whether they are Asperger's syndrome or whatever it is, they are infused in a regular classroom, which means at what point in time do you engage them in this therapy for communication? And if it is not clearly defined, you may want to assume that that is done in the English language science class, the math class, the physics class, the chemistry class, and all of those things. No, it is not. It is a section of a therapy that the students probably engage with their peers outside of the regular classroom, not there in physics or English language, that brings them into an environment where they communicate. And one of the pieces that I focused on, what is the baseline skills? So the psychologist, when you interview the psychologist, he or she has the baseline on the student's social communication skills, so as the teacher and the teacher assistant. Now, when they make those progressions from a qualitative perspective, not a quantitative, it gives credence to say Johnny would engage for 3 minutes, but the Lego made Johnny engage for 10 minutes, and he asked questions which normally he would not do in interaction. And I think that is important because they have that information. So it's not that the data that I'm talking about is not present, but was not asked for as part of this research. And I think going back to the qualitative piece, as to what Dr. Laws is saying, if I have to implement this, what steps do I take to do this? Which, I mean, the SIP model for me, questions 1 through 4, does not help me significantly in implementing it. Those could have been narratives that we talk about the price and all of that stuff. That just add extra frill to the research. The research itself is question 5. The perceptions of the multidisciplinary team and what they saw in a 12-month period and what they believe the impact could be should we continue or make this a district-wide piece. So from a psychologist's perspective, there has to be that piece. From the teacher perspective, there has to be that piece. And from the TA, who is one-on-one with the candidates or the students throughout the day, they have more voice in terms of this shift that has happened because they are the ones who have this social interaction with them. And they could tell you whether the Lego significantly impacted the student more so than a collective team, because the data that the psychologist uses from going in once every 4 weeks or once every 3 weeks comes from 2 people mostly, the TA and the teacher. And so I think that is my focal point, and I'm a little bit biased or passionate about this because I did this for 18 years and I was an autism director for a state system, and I truly understand the world and I see the value for K-12 because I was dealing with the students that could not fit into a K-12 setting and they had to bring them into residential. And then once we get them through all of this therapy to fit socially back into the norms of K-12, they go back into their school system. So there's great value in this piece, but I wanted to do justice to it from a qualitative perspective, and that is just my recommendation. I think the literature piece on the Lego pros and cons of it needs to be addressed. I mean, I want to see the value from 12 months, and I don't think the SIP model did justice to it from a case study perspective, because
Okay.
it added a lot of fluff on 1 through 4 when there should be a lot of meat in 5, which is the crux of it. So, and she has that data, and she could talk to those people, and I think it's not too late to add value to a great dissertation versus leave it hanging. Anybody who's an expert in the field could read that dissertation and say it's mediocre. But anybody who's a layperson could say this is a good dissertation. So it depends on your lens.
And I value everything you said, Dr. Bull. I think knowing what we know, knowing what you've shared, we could redesign a better research study. And perhaps some of those recommendations ought to go into Chapter 5. You'd like to hear more of the qualitative data from the team, you know, and again, I think she probably has more survey or interview data than has been presented. So perhaps revisiting the data she has, as well as revisiting some of those interviews, would add more meat on question number 5. Fixing Chapter 2 by adding to the lit review or shifting the lens there can happen. That can be done. Knowing that this is imperfect and that we've got a practitioner researcher learning to do her first dissertation, again, things that you want fixed before it reaches your desk, Dr. Bull, beef up Chapter 2, the lit review, and Chapter 5, more meat from the interviews. Do you think that?
I think that's a compromise, and I think more so from the people on the ground, for them to talk about it, because they talked about growth. So we know growth took place. But what is that growth from the lens of the psychologist? What is the growth from the lens of the TA? What is the growth from the lens of the teacher? From the team members, they all see growth. Growth is relative, but from the psychologist, it's a hard number because they quantify it. And that quantification from the psychologist, it's important because the psychologist is the one who is driving this whole piece from the multidisciplinary team. The teachers implement, and that data comes from the psychologist. So I think probably an in-depth interview with 3 people, the psychologist, the teacher, and the teacher assistants, could give a more in-depth piece, and the psychologist could provide baseline data for all students who were part of this process. And because of they have documentation, by redacting the names of all of those folks, the psychologist should be able to provide the baseline data and the end data, and we should be able to quantify it and see what happened to the 3 or 4 students who were part of this process. And the quantification of that, even from a graphical perspective, would suffice to add value to this whole piece, assuming one of the limitations, we cannot assume that all the changes that happen because of the Lego therapy. So we have to add that in limitations in terms of maturation and other things that are happening in the class and growth and parent involvement at home and all of that stuff. But the window that we studied, we saw the spike, and we could attribute it to their engagement, which we saw from the TA and the teacher's perspective, and the data that shows the spike from the psychologist's perspective. I think those are available, and it's minuscule compared to other things that could be done to the research at this time. I think those are good compromise.
I appreciate that. And team, committee, here's my suggestion then, and you tell me if this will work, Dr. Bull. I will go back to Lynn. I'll explain to her that both the changes and recommendations that Dr. Owens and Dr. Laws have made, well, I've got a recording of this video, so I suppose I could share some of that with Lynn, or explain that she needs to beef up Chapter 2 and Chapter 5 with some more chapter 4, I guess, if it's some more interview data from the psychologist, teacher, and TA, and then incorporate that into chapter 5. Lynn turns things around pretty quickly, so I think if I give her those changes and recommendations to make, she'll get them back to me pretty quickly. I will review those and then forward the copy to you, Dr. Bull. Is it, or forward the copy to the whole committee,
The
including
committee
you,
at
Dr.
that time, once, I think if the committee is satisfied with the request, I would just read it for formality because at this point in time, it is what it is. But I think since those folks are still available or for an interview, if they are not, then it becomes an issue. She could go back into her recordings and things like that. But if those 3 folks are not available in the district or the school, it creates a problem. So
I
we'll
think
just
they
have-
are. I believe that they are. So
Yeah.
we can do that. And then when is the latest that I need to get you a copy if Lynn wants to graduate this spring, sir?
I think now everything is very fluid. So
Yeah.
and I do a 48-hour turnaround
Okay.
on reading dissertations now to help candidates. And that's why
Okay.
I try to sit through every dissertation so that we don't have these roadblocks. And I don't want them to perceive that the dean is impeding my graduation, but we just want to make sure that, you know, going back to what Law said, when you read 4 and 5, can I implement this in another district? And that's why it should be. So
Okay.
So turn it at any time, and once it comes from the committee members, I just peruse it just because I'm reading them now for knowledge sake at that time. So it's not to turn it back. I would not turn it back. Let me say that.
I will get you a revised copy soon as Lynn can get it back, and I can distribute it to all. In the meantime, any last thoughts here, committee, before we bring Lynn back?
I'm good.
Okay, so I'm going to exit because I'm not part of the committee at this time. And thank you all very much for leading such a passionate research that helps kids who are marginalized in the school system. That's where my heart is, to make a difference for these students in EC world, because it's my world also. And I'm excited about what this would mean for other students moving forward. So thank you.
Me too. Thanks, Dr. Bull.
Thank you.
Dr. Owens, would you ask Ms. Brashear Ray to read?
I will.
Hey, Lynn, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm recording this, so I'm going to be politically correct and say that the dean has some questions and wants you to revisit and do a little more work. The rest of us, Dr. Owens and Dr. Laws and I have comments and some corrections and suggestions for you too. So there's a little bit more work. Your committee has approved your dissertation with changes. So congratulations, but there's a little more work to do. So you're not quite there yet. And I'll let Dr. Bull put his stamp of approval on this and say that you're Dr. Brashear Ray, but your committee is behind you. And I know you well enough to know that whatever I ask you to do, you're going to do. Dr. Owens, have you been keeping any notes?
I have been.
You had things covered pretty well for Dr. Laws and yourself.
Yeah.
Dr. Bull wants you to revisit Chapter 2, the Lit Review, especially to tell us some more about the literature supporting Lego-based therapy.
Okay.
And then he asks that you focus primarily on that question number 5, the perceptions of the team, and try to get a little more data. He suggested re-interviewing the psychologist and teacher and TA, but Lynn, anything that you can pull from your interviews to suggest, again, that the recommendations from the folks were that this be continued and why, anything that you can add there would be good. So, Dr. Laws, have I captured it pretty much, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think if she can weave uh, the answer to, and really doesn't have, in my opinion, again, Jim, we worked together a long time. You're the chair, whatever you think, but to me, she can answer the process question more thoroughly, which is what we talked about with the recommendations. And then her conclusion can be what Dr. Bulls wants. That answer to question 5 of should we continue this and expand it, she could kind of almost put at the end of her chapter 5, it seems to me.
Okay.
And that way she doesn't have to revamp a whole lot, so that as we talked through it, as Lynn presented it, and you did a good job presenting too, Lynn, I want to tell you, that her recommendations came from process, and her conclusion could come from product.
Okay.
And now you have to beef it up. You're going to end up probably with several pages added to your chapter 5, which is not a bad thing.
Okay.
But it's not a hard thing either, Lynn. With your knowledge of your study,
Yeah.
I don't, you just got to go back to your data that you collected with your interviews, and just
Yeah.
just kind of weave it in and go back to your chapter 2 and say, the teacher assistants thought that blah, 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 which correlates with what Jones said in 2018 in her study, which blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
And you just kind of weave those two together. And I mean, that's my opinion. But I think that's the easiest fix.
And what we want to do is show growth, that through the interviews, the team observed growth, and that's that's why they would recommend replicating it and doing it bigger and better elsewhere. Is that what you understand, Dr. Laws?
Yeah, but we've got to define growth too.
Right.
Remember this. Dr. Owens, tell me I'm wrong, because I usually am. But the growth is a socialization growth, not an academic.
Not academic.
But yes, that's right. Because he focused on that socialization and communication, but he also wants the baseline data. So looking at those students in terms of where they were when you first started, and then when you completed.
So if there's a table that you can throw in, I don't know if you can even quote the psychologist telling you that stuff. He said use student data and black out the names.
I don't think you're going to have that.
No, I think anecdotal data from the psychologist suggesting why he or she saw growth. Great.
Yeah.
Give us a meaty quote about that.
But she doesn't have student data. Do you have student data?
I just have the information where the teachers and the people implementing it, where they used like after the Lego sessions, where they would put in, but nothing before. I didn't collect anything before. I don't think they've collected anything before the
That's a whole different study, Lynn. Stick with the perceptions of the team and their perceptions of growth and change and improvement, and why they would recommend replicating as a result. That's what you've got, and I think that's, at the end of this, we could think of lots of different ways to improve your research and redo it differently, but we're not going to redo it at this point. And what we need to do is put a patch and a Band-Aid on this and fix it. So again, Dr. Bull would like to see a little more in chapter 2, the lit review, some more in chapter 5, and get me a draft, and then I'll review it and share it with the team. I believe that all of this again is contingent, but you're there. So You know, if we were in the conference room, I'd hug you and say, congratulations, Dr. Bradshaw Ray. But we got one more draft to do. And then it'll go to Barbara. Steve, does it go to Barbara before or after Dr. Bull?
I think as much as,
Yeah, she said that if I had to do a little bit more, if it was just like a little bit, that I didn't have to come back to her. But it sounds like with what you want me to add, that I'll send it back to her and then.
I think probably she needs to on this one.
Yes.
Okay. And again, Steve, is that before or after me?
I think you sign off and say, this is what I wanted, and then she goes to Barbara.
Okay.
But you
And
can, but you
one
can,
other question here, in terms of actually signing a Lynn successfully defended form, I guess I'll print out one of those and sign it and send it to you, Dr. Laws, send it to Dr. Owens.
if it were me, Jim, with the new normal that we have, Lynn's gonna need to get signature pages on the cotton paper when she's done.
I have them printed so I can get Dr. Owens to sign and send it to you, Dr.
I would get that, the successfully defended sheet that Dr. Palermo is talking about.
Okay.
Let him scan that to you as well, Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
You get Dr. Owens' signature on all those things, and then get it to Dr. Palermo, and then he can get it. If you're coming back down this way, then you can bring them. But if you're not, then mail them to Wendy, Jim, and I'll sign, because I'll be coming some.
Okay.
And I can make sure Dr. Bull gets it.
Okay. So that sounds like a process. What other questions or what other business? Dr. Laws, anything further?
No, and Lynn needs to feel good. It's not gonna take her long at all.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things too, is that she really did an excellent job defending, and lots of work has gone into her dissertation, and we can help her. I can help her with those edits,
Okay.
Those revisions, and take a look at it before we even push it up to you guys.
Thank you, Dr. Owens.
Okay. Yes.
You're on the short rows now.
Okay. Very, very much so. Sometimes in our personal experience, we want everything extended, but anyway, we have her, and we're proud of her.
Yeah,
I am as well. Lynn,
Yeah.
thank you very much for all of this. You've got another draft to do, but again, short rows. And thank you for the work that you're doing in your district with the children, and get around to this when you can.
Okay.
Take care.
And she knows today that she has successfully defended her dissertation.
That is correct.
That's right,
Okay.
Dr. Lynn Blackshear Ray.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
I'm going to sign off. Thank you very
Okay.
much, everybody.
Okay.
All right.
Nice meeting you.
Appreciate you.
Uh-huh.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Mhm.